Okay, guys, so by now you should have responded to your first topic for the last discussion board. There will be two discussion boards. It's now time to start on topic B. So, with that said, this video will be shorter, but let's go ahead and go through this one together. We will be reading through it, and I will be making points of iteration, giving warnings and tips, and maybe even adding extra credit or providing some missing requirements. All right, so we're going to read through this excerpt from the Dallas Morning News. Here is the URL that I used to get it. I retrieved the information, and that was in the fall. I forgot to note that I did that during the fall of 2020. So the title of this little excerpt that I have from the Dallas Morning News is "This is not creating justice. This is creating havoc." Subtitle: Vandalized retailers post-COVID recovery gets delayed. Deep Ellum, so then there's more of a subtitle. Deep Ellum West End owners tried to protect their property over the weekend, including one who'd stood in front of his store all night. So this goes back to the summer of 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and some of the political and social unrest that was going on. And I chose this one because it happened specifically in Dallas. And as you can see, I have a picture here of an African-American gentleman. His name's Barry McCary. The byline says, Barry McCary Jr. stands in front of his yet-to-be-opened vintage shop called Dated, Faded, Worn in Deep Ellum on Monday. A few days earlier, he stood in front of the store to protect it from damage during the protests. So he says, unfortunately, I couldn't protect my neighbor's spots, he said. Okay. So that means that what? That he watched his neighbor's property get destroyed or vandalized or looted. He actually had to watch that happen. So an interesting question, guys, is does that mean that do you think that he had a duty to try to protect his neighbor's stores? For example, if no one was looting or vandalizing or damaging his property, let's say from 8 a.m. to 8:15, but from 8:15 to 8:20, they were damaging and destroying his neighbor's property and looting it. Did he have a duty to go and help them and return to his property only if he saw people doing the same to his business? So what do you think? Write a paragraph and respond to this for up to 5 course bonus points. Just add it to one in the same document or submission that you do for this topic. So, to continue on with the article, on Saturday night, Barry McCary Jr. decided to go check on his store in Deep Ellum, which he hoped to open the first week of July. He stood in front of the store all night, protecting it from 2 waves of looters, although his windows were damaged anyway. I'm going to leave his picture up because I want you to see that this is a real person here. He said, "It would have been worse if I wasn't here," McCary said. "But it's unfortunate to be using your money to open a business and have to put more into fix the glass and put the boards up." McCary announced in mid-February, so this was of 2020 before the pandemic really started, that he was opening a vintage shop in Deep Ellum called Dated, Faded, Worn, a play on the Dallas-Fort Worth initials. A few weeks later, his contractor caught the coronavirus and ended up in the hospital. Oh, by the way, do you see how this semester we've been looking at examples and case study where somehow we find a connection between COVID, right, and the killing of George Floyd and the aftermath? I really want you guys to appreciate that. I've tried to make this course. I mean, ethics is definitely relevant. It's about your moral compass and deciding how to be as a person and what's right and wrong, and you're constantly, faced with that. But as you can see, I've tried to make this class even more relevant, more practical, so that you can see that people who are making you take this class, there's a reason for it. And in my class, you really see it because I use current events. So I hope you appreciate that. All right. So then he says, all of my permits were in the contractor's name, and by the time they were switched to a new contractor, the city had been shut down. Construction came to a standstill, so again, because of COVID. My story is amazing for a news story, but unfortunate for me, said McCary. For 2 months, and of course, this is back in time, right? Spring, summer 2020, many stores had little to no business due to COVID closures. Now, a few weeks after reopening their doors, many were looted and vandalized as protests swept the country over the death of George Floyd, who protesters say is just one example of police brutality and systemic racism in law enforcement. As protesters went up and down the streets of Dallas for 3 nights starting Friday, many stores along their path were damaged or had items stolen. McCary was in the process of getting insurance, so the fix-up costs will come out of his pocket. On Sunday, he boarded up his yet-to-be-open store. McCary says, "The past week has been an emotional roller coaster because I'm Black," McCary said, "but I'm also a business owner, and I'm seeing other effects of the protests that I do not fully condone." Okay, so for extra credit, some more points, I want you to find 3 definitions for condone. Make sure that the definitions that you find do not have any version of the word condone. Provide the URL for the definition and name the source, and you can get some extra credit. Looking up the word condone and doing some research on the definition and its meanings can help you better understand what he's saying and the prompt. All right, so food for thought and question. Some claim that the looting and destruction of property following the killing of George Floyd is a result of citizens being fed up with police brutality. As such, some go on to say that we should see that looting and destruction of property, that looting is an acceptable instance. And here I need to add the word of, so I will have corrected this by the time you guys see this, of social and political protests. In other words, some think we should at least tolerate looting and the destruction of property when such behavior is caused by compelling social political concerns. Now notice, guys, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm not saying this is true of me, and I'm not saying it's true of you. I'm saying here's what some people say. Here's what some people say about using looting, vandalism, theft, or destruction of property in relation to protests and social and political concerns. It is interesting to note how McCary, the Black business owner of a shop, or a shop he was trying to open, appears to understand emotions associated with the killing of George Floyd, but at the same time does not fully condoning what some did during the name of civil protest following the killing of George Floyd. This leads us to our last discussion board question. Do you think Barry McCary, this guy right here, and wouldn't it be fun for you guys to go and visit his shop and see if it's open and say, hey, like if you could find him or talk to the store employees, go say, hey, we discussed your situation, we read about you, and we discussed this in my ethics class, and we were writing arguments about such and such. I think that would be so cool. But do you think Barry McCary was obligated, morally obligated, to fully tolerate the destruction of his business by those looting and destroying property during the protest against police brutality? Okay, so requirements in responding to questions. Respond in the form of an argument. Everything in your argument should be written as one coherent, compelling paragraph. Present your conclusion first. Wording should be based on the question in bold. So I'm not going to repeat the directions that I gave you for topic A, but you're basically doing the same thing here with this question and how you start off your first sentence. Whether you have a definite position or whether you need to say it's not rational for you to take a definite position on. Okay, so then present your conclusion first. Okay, present reasons for said conclusion. So then the reasons, of course, are given in one and the same paragraph, right, as your conclusion, your first sentence. Just as with the other topic, one of your reasons should be in the form of a definition for tolerate. Make sure you pick a definition that connects to the topic, the context and question for the topic. Put the definition in quotation marks verbatim, or you will commit plagiarism and get a 0 for this task. Be sure to tell me which online dictionary you're using. Remember, your definition cannot have any version of the word you're trying to define, so you cannot have any version of the word tolerate, like toleration or tolerating in it. Be sure to incorporate wording from your definition into at least one of your other reason statements. So everything I said about defining the term depravity and citing it and researching it and using it in your reasoning also applies here to the notion of tolerate. Be sure to incorporate wording from your definition into at least one of your other reason statements. Use good writing skills, proper mechanics. By the time you get to this, I will have added that you need to check your response for, sentence fragments, run-ons, comma splices. Make sure you don't have any of those in there. Those are basics that you need to look out for. One thing that I want to add is you get 3 attempts for this. So if you make a mistake, just redo the attempt. Do I want to say anything else? Nope, that's it. I will have created a video for your Zoom class. Dr. Pulte's going to play it. Make sure that you have listened to it before you decide on your final answer for this.